Facilities that make this program possible are provided by the City of Highland Park. Programs are produced independently by members of the community. The City of Highland Park is not affiliated with the following program or the producers of public access programming and is not responsible for the content. The following program does not reflect the opinions of the City of Highland Park.
Hello, and welcome to Cahnmanns Current Events Roundtable. Today we have a wonderful guest, a guest that I think you're really going to enjoy, and things that you may have not heard before. And her name is Sarah Van Loon, and she's from AJC Chicago, and Sarah's going to tell you all about that. And we're going to talk about global Jewish advocacy. And that is, we're going to be talking about, it was founded in 1906 with offices around the world, and it works to enhance the well-being and security of Israel and Jewish people to advance human rights and democratic values for all. And Sarah's going to tell you about their diplomacy, their legislative advocacy, their coalition building, and communications. Oh my God, Sarah, this is quite a lot of things that you do. Welcome to Cahnmanns Roundtable.
Thank you so much for having me, Suzanne. It is a true pleasure.
Thank you for coming and talking about this. And we saw each other not too long ago. We met, and I thought that this is something that we really need to bring to the table. In fact, I didn't even know that this program was around, and I thought I knew everything. See, I'm always learning. And you work with a lot of diplomats, you work with a lot of mayors, governors, people from around the world, probably leaders, presidents, prime ministers. I mean, everybody's included in this program, and this is really an amazing program. We've had a lot of shows on what's going, anti-Semitism in the colleges, but we haven't talked really about global anti-Semitism that's going on around the world. And maybe you could talk a little bit, start with, first of all, what is AJC? What does it stand for, and how you got involved in it, and let's talk about what they're doing around the world, globally.
Sure. Well, again, thank you so much for having me on your show. So as you started with, AJC, we are the American Jewish Committee. We've been around for 111 years. So we stand for human rights and democratic values for all, and of course, promoting the safety and security of the state of Israel, and indeed for all Jewish people around the world. So I found out about AJC about 4 years ago. I was working in the Jewish world, but I felt increasingly frustrated with what I was seeing and reading on the news, and not only what was happening around the world, but here at home as well. And I felt like there wasn't anything I could do personally to help make a difference, to help stand up for Israel. And that's when I found out about AJC. So when I learned...
And you said it was 100, how many years?
111 years.
And I'm just finding out about it, and it's 111 years. I know, you hear about Jewish United Fund, and you hear about all these other groups, Stand With Us. We had, people from Stand With Us on the show, and we have not heard from you guys. So I am so happy that you're here. So tell us a little bit about how you started in,
Yeah, so it all goes back to that initial frustration and wanting an outlet for that and wanting to find an opportunity to do that. And that's exactly what I found at AJC. When I learned about not only their local advocacy efforts with local diplomats and interfaith and interethnic leaders, but also on a national and global scale, I realized that I could use my voice to help make a difference on these issues, and that I could actually make an impact overall. So I was very, very fortunate when I was looking. They had a staff opening, so I was able to kind of jump jump in as a staff member, but I also put my money where my mouth is, and I joined Access, which is AJC's Young Professional Division, and so I'm on their leadership level with that, because I wanted personally still the opportunities to advocate on these issues that I care so much about, to be able to defend Israel's right to exist, and indeed to defend all minorities and groups worldwide.
And you know, Sarah, which is really interesting, is that you come from a different background than most Jewish people, and your background is you came from Christianity background. And you converted to Judaism. So you have a completely different, you see things out of different eyes. You know, one eye, Christianity, and how they see things, and now out of, you know, how Jewish people see things. And which is really good, because not everybody gets a chance to, you know, to do that. I think my heritage was very similar to yours, and so you know, I'm so happy to meet somebody very similar to my own background in many ways, and so you know, I see also things from different ideas and different backgrounds and different teachings that I went through, and I'd like you to, you know, talk about, first of all, what did you see about Judaism that really, you know, got your, you know, you got your goat, you know, you wanted to, you know, because people, you know, there's so much anti-Semitism around, and yet you're part of joining the very group that's having, you know, those eyes upon them.
Absolutely, and that was a big concern for my husband when I first told him that I wanted to convert. Really, it came out of, I kind of grew up, as you said, as an evangelical Christian, and then at my Christian college, I kind of realized that there were questions that I had that weren't really being answered, and the more that I looked, the more that I sought for different reasons or outcomes, what have you, I found those in Judaism. And the more that I read about Judaism, the more that I got to know it, both by working in the Jewish community, by marrying my Jewish husband, the more I realized that that was the best fit for me personally. So my husband and I, we've been married for 7 years. I didn't convert for our wedding. It wasn't something that we really thought about back then. So 7 years after we were married, I personally made the decision to go through a conversion process. In fact, I converted through Anshe Emet, which is a conservative synagogue in the city. They've got this incredible Jew by Choice program, and it was perfect for people like me who had a religious background growing up, but were looking to learn more about the Jewish faith. We're looking to become a part of the Jewish peoplehood, and it was such a warm and welcoming environment. I learned so much. I made so many great connections. I'm so grateful for that opportunity.
You sound a lot like Ivanka Trump. She went through very, you know, through her conversion and the same type of thing.
Yeah, it's deeply meaningful.
Yeah, and so what is going on? You know, what I can't understand, why has anti-Semitism, and we just did the show on anti-Semitism in colleges, and the group that I had with Stand With Us were two young men from the University of Illinois talking about anti-Semitism in the colleges and what to do about it for students. What is all this, what's happening all of a sudden? In Europe, it's getting, you know, it's exploding, and why is it going on right now? So and what is age, and you could also speak to the point of what AJC is doing about it.
Absolutely. So one of the things that AJC has been seeing, one of the trends that we've noticed, is that the rise in anti-Semitism has also been correlating with the rise in populism within Europe. So what previously used to be on the margins of society or only espoused by real extremist voices is now getting more leeway and leverage to be able to join the public discourse. So a lot of that, we believe, has to do with lack of education. So in Germany, you're actually seeing a positive trend because of their long-standing efforts to educate not only about Jews and Judaism, but about the Holocaust, about dealing with their problems as a country and facing that head on. And you're not necessarily seeing that throughout all countries in Europe. In fact, recently there's been an increase in Holocaust revisionism, where, you know, we'll hear from some countries that, oh, they actually saved the Jews and they weren't ones that had to deal with it at all. when really history shows a very different story.
Like in Poland, for instance, in fact, they have a Holocaust museum now, which was really, because I know people in Poland, there were a lot of Polish people that were very helpful and did save a lot of Jewish people, but there were a lot of them that did turn in a lot of Jewish people as well. And then you hear that the museum, the Holocaust Museum, is now in Poland, and which is kind of shocking, because and so there are different programs that are obviously working toward against the BDS movement, and also programs that are for the BDS programs around the world too. Maybe you can talk a little bit how AJC does, how they, when you hear of the BDS programs, tell the sanctions and that they're doing against Israel and Israel products. What does AJC, when they hear something like that going on, what do they do to combat it? What are their...
Absolutely. So AJC bounces into action. It's not like we've been sitting on the sidelines. As we mentioned earlier, AJC has a global architecture. So we have 5 offices in Europe. One that we just opened in Poland, in Central Europe. That covers 7 countries over there. We've got an office in Berlin and in Brussels. So we reach out to our interlocutors. We reach out not only to diplomats that we have relationship with, but also the people who are making policy decisions, because we understand that when a country's highest governmental officials come out and firmly denounce anti-Semitism and bigotry in all of its forms, there tends to be a decline in anti-Semitism. So we want to support that and help them in whatever ways that we can, whether it's through education, both for lawmakers as well as citizens, through different programs, and also through relationship building. These are all very important avenues for AJC, and as you mentioned earlier, our communications, that's one of our main messaging that we're able to do now. So AJC has the largest media platform of all of the global Jewish advocacy organizations. I believe we have over 400,000 followers on Facebook or Twitter. And so we use our multilingual media platform to help spread this education, to help spread this awareness, and to be able to combat rising issues such as the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement.
Now, do you actually do you ever get a chance, like, say in France, where where you hear a rise in anti-Semitism, do you get the chance how do you get to, is it president? Is he President Macron, right? Because some are prime ministers, some are president, some, our chancellor. Do you get to talk to, like, Macron or Prime Minister May or from Germany, Mrs. Merkel? Do you ever get a chance does somebody get to them personally?
Oh yes, absolutely. In fact, our European director, Simone Rodin-Benzaken, she also oversees our Paris office, and she's based in Paris. So we're very fortunate to have someone like her, because she has very close connections, not only with many members of the French government, but also with Macron himself. And so, there's been certain instances, whether we see it happening in the UN or in other bodies, where a major issue will come up, and we'll want to go straight to who we believe will be the most effective. And we're able to call on those relationships and the partnerships that we have to help not only share our concerns, but also, if they need advice or recommendations, to help provide those resources as well.
So they hear you.
Absolutely.
And they get the message to their people, which is really important. So you're touching on really, the main people up there. You're not just talking to just maybe not just only maybe people that, like, representatives in the district, but you're talking to major players here.
Of course, but that being said, it's also really important for us to engage with lower level diplomats as well, because many of them are career civil servants. So it's not that they're only in that position and they don't go anywhere else. Many of them will continue on. They'll get promoted within the foreign ministry. Some will even become the foreign minister or the prime minister. So AJC very much keeps the long game in view when we're dealing with anyone, quite
That's
frankly.
right. They could become the next president or prime minister. You don't think about that.
Exactly.
That's true, because you may think they have a lower level job, but they come up pretty fast.
Exactly, and so it's important for us to keep in mind with any relationship that we're building that this isn't just for this single issue or this single moment in time. We genuinely want to build deep, lasting relationships. We want our interlocutors to look at AJC as a trusted resource, as a centrist, moderate organization that's not going to, sway this way or the other depending on what's popular at the time per se, but that we really take a long, measured view at our issues and that we're trusted advocates for that. And I think that our relationships and our successes have spoken to that as well.
Now, if the countries are more, like you said, populism or nationalism, how do you get to these people? Because, years ago, I guess Germany was nationalism. That's what happened. The rise of Adolf Hitler, and the nationalism came up. And like we have now, there is some rise, you said, of populism. But then we have, I think it was an article I saw by Alan Dershowitz. And it was an article that it talked about the hard right and the hard left poses different dangers. Where the extreme right was the neo-Nazis, the Ku Klux Klan, and then you got the left, which is the Antifa that's coming up, all kinds of other sort of radicals also pose a danger. Even in the U.S. it's coming up in the U.S. So in the colleges where the Antifa people don't like if there is a group that's more pro-Israel and they don't want them to speak. How do you handle that type of thing? Not you personally, but the whole group of AJC, what did they do for this?
Absolutely. So one of the ways that AJC works on campus issues specifically, whether it's the BDS movement or just any kind of pro-Israel student who wants to help make their voice heard or just wants to feel comfortable being a Jew on campus, we try and equip not only the student, so we've got different programs either spanning from high school or different college opportunities, but we really want to make sure that issues, trends, groups that we don't believe should have the limelight, so to speak, that we don't give them extra fuel to that fire. So don't fall down to the same traps or pitfalls, if you will, of becoming protesters at their own event. Options are to do different counter-programming or to have a silent vigil outside for example, when Linda Sarsour spoke in Chicago. Instead of having this large, awful demonstration, we hosted a vigil, the students of Northwestern outside of that, completely silent. For anyone who wanted to enter that, we weren't denying them hearing her speak. We don't believe in suppression of speech with that regard. But we also wanted to make it known that there are real victims and there's real consequences to these actions and to different speech that they promote. And so AJC works to find diplomatic solutions, I would say first and foremost, to many of these issues and opportunities. And frankly, it all comes back to building relationships. How are you able to have a conversation one-on-one with another person as a human being? To step outside of, well, I'm on this side and you're on that side. Where are issues that we have commonality? What are things that we can agree on? And how can I truly listen to you and your concerns as an individual and likewise? And that's, I think, the only path forward that we have for creating a more unified and just world all around.
What do they do? Like at Northwestern has a week, anti-Israel week, which they call the same word as what happened in South Africa, which is
apartheid.
Apartheid week. Yes, thank you. Senior moment. Apartheid week. What do they do every year? They have Apartheid week at Northwestern. Here in Chicago, in Evanston, and this is our hometown. And how does AJC? What do they do about that? And how how do the Jewish students feel about that?
Yeah, so AJC, we want to work with the on-campus Jewish community that's there. We definitely don't believe in coming in and kind of saying, this is what we believe and this is the only option. We want to support the Jewish groups that are there in whatever way we can, whether it's through resources, for counter-programming. But really, I think what comes up during these apartheid weeks is, how can you help educate or re-educate people that have a very different view of what's going on with Israel? And how can you both listen to their concerns and show that, you know, supporting Israel doesn't mean you're negating everything that they're concerned about. AJC has been a long-time advocate of a two-state solution, so we as well want self-determination for the Palestinian people. And so I think there's other ways of having that conversation and not necessarily doing shock and awe tactics like putting up, you know, an apartheid wall on campus. I think they're often just trying to get students to be uncomfortable with who they are, whether it be Jews or Christians that support Israel. I think it tries to really shut down a student's opportunity to voice themselves.
Yeah, I think we talked about, we were having good lunch today at the Bluegrass together, and we were talking about Project Interchange. Yes. Now that sounds like something, now when they have Apartheid Week at Northwestern, Project Interchange could be going on at the same time, which I thought was really, I'd like you to explain to our viewers what Project Interchange is.
Absolutely. So Project Interchange has been around AJC for more than 35 years. And what that does is take thought leaders, governmental officials, students, people in the media on special trips to Israel. So what they do is they bring them so they can see firsthand what it's like to be living in the Jewish state. And I think it's very hard for people to really understand what life is like until they've been there themselves, until they've not only visited Israel and see how close some of the towns are to the Palestinian territories and where there's other terrorist activities, but also to take them into Ramallah and for them to meet Palestinians and for them to understand what it's like for Palestinians living there as well.
And what it's like for people. And Project Interchange, do they ever take any students that are not Jewish, that are, that are Christians, or they're from, the Muslim background?
Yes.
And people that we're talking about, and I think I said Black Lives Matters, but you said it was a different organization that is teaching anti-Semitism. You called it what?
I believe it was the Movement for Black Lives. They had put Israel as an apartheid state on there.
And
I could be wrong, but I believe that's what it is.
And so taking some of those students that are actually at Apartheid Week with their signs, Apartheid Week, everybody should be against Israel because they're the aggressors, they're taking away the rights of Palestinians. And these people, these students, to take a few of them along on Project Interchange and really show how both Israel and the Palestinians, they do work together there. I think I mentioned on one of the shows, my son was a doctor in Israel, surgeon, and when he would operate on not just Israelis, if Palestinians needed an operation, general surgery, he didn't say, hey, you're a Palestinian, I don't work on you. He worked on, he treated the Palestinians as he treated the Israeli patients. It was all the same. And they need to know that Israel does that for their, if somebody's sick, they go into an Israeli hospital, they come into the universities. They're welcomed at all the universities in Israel. They have both. It's not just Jewish students at Hebrew University and all the other universities in Israel. It's mixed with both, Muslims, Christians, Jewish, all together.
Absolutely. AJC has had great success. In fact, this past January, we brought a delegation of student leaders from Brown University to Israel on a Project Interchange mission. And that was one of our main goals. We specifically chose students on campus who were going to have an influence on others. So one of them was the main editor of the student newspaper, and because we wanted them to not only see firsthand
and they
what
weren't
life
Jewish.
was like. Exactly, they
Right.
weren't Jewish.
Okay, I just want to get that across because I think that's really important.
Yes, I would say the majority of the participants on Project Interchange are not Jewish. Because we believe it's important for anyone and everyone to have the opportunity to visit Israel firsthand and to see how complex it actually is. Just as you were saying earlier about Israel as the Goliath, I think it's very easy to make media assumptions and say Israel is this, big Goliath and the Palestinians are this weak David. But it's not as simple as that. And I think AJC really works to bring the nuance out of that and the complexity. And the student leaders from Brown who came back, all of them we interviewed before and after, what do you think about this? What are your positions on that? All of them had complete changes in their perspective on Israel. And they said, I had no idea that this was a possibility. I had no idea that this was what life was like. And one of the students even said, now when I see an anti-Israel occurrence happening on campus, I am much more likely to step in and help, defend Israel because I've been there and I've seen firsthand what it's really like. And I think that is one of the most powerful things to come out of Project Interchange is the changing of hearts and minds and really perspectives of people about Israel.
How do they, Sarah, I've often wondered, these are young students, how do they start thinking about this right away? You would think that students would be more open to everything. Why are they taking sides so early? Why, because it seems like, colleges now, not even colleges, like middle schools, high schools, they bring, I know everybody, in this area, say Deerfield High School, Highland Park High School, Glenbrook North, all these different high schools are very open to, they talk about everything, and the kids seem to get along really well, and then they go to college and they become so anti this and anti that. What happens when they go to college? How does this work?
Well, I don't think it's a new phenomenon. Think about even back into the 60s. I feel like I heard, my parents' generation and the generation before that always complaining about young college kids. I think it's just the time where they're able to come and figure out ideas on their own. But I do think you brought out an important point that while they may be taught certain things in school, in their high school and earlier years, it's once they get to college that there's more of an opportunity. What is your social justice statement going to say? How are you going to act on this or that? And so you kind of feel pulled in these different directions, and so many things are laid out as very black and white, and it's only this way or only that, when for many issues that's just not the case. And so you really have to kind of push back, but that's hard on campus when you feel like you could be ostracized or demonized for having a certain position. So some students may either just go along with the flow, some may stay quiet. And so for us, AJC, we've got our Leaders for Tomorrow program, or called LIFT, and that's specifically catered towards high school students. We now are in 4 cities across the United States piloting this program. And what we do is we teach our young students how to not only feel comfortable with their Jewish identity, but also to really educate themselves on these issues so that when they get to college campus, these aren't new things that they've come about,
right,
but also they know how to have a conversation one-on-one.
Exactly, because a lot of kids, especially in this area, they're sort of, they're so, they don't have these negativities in their life. Everything is done by their parents. They get taken to their sporting events, their dance classes. Everything is done for them. And they live, they live this life that everything is, happily ever after. And then they get into these situations and they don't know what to do because they never heard of this before. They didn't realize they've heard of anti-Semitism, they heard of anti-Black, they've heard of anti-Muslim, but they really never encountered any of this. So this is the first time really, most of the time in their life, that they start really feeling something is not quite right.
Yes.
And somebody really has to come and really direct them in a little bit. And I think AJC is doing an amazing job. I'm so happy to have learned about this. I don't know what took so long that, that's why I want you here on the show so we can broadcast what this is all about.
Absolutely. And truly, it's not just staff leading the work. I feel like with a lot of Jewish organizations, you're able to write a check and support it, which is absolutely important and necessary. But with AJC, you actually have the opportunity to be an advocate, to participate in advocacy firsthand.
I'm going to be an advocate. I just
Exactly.
joined. I'm going to be talking to diplomats and ambassadors, and maybe I could, I've had the Consul General of France on the show, so maybe I can get the Consul General of all these different countries that come back on the show and talk.
Absolutely. We're very fortunate in Chicago, and I think that's one of the reasons why we've been able to have such a hub for Jewish advocacy is because of the more than 80 consulates that are centered here. So AJC works tirelessly to build relationships with all of them, and we do that through our lay leaders like you. So I'm so excited to have you as one of our newest advocates.
Thank you.
I welcome anyone else who wants to learn more.
Yeah, and contact us at AJC and AJC Chicago, correct?
Yes, so our website, you can find us at ajc.org/Chicago, or you can send us an email at chicago@ajc.org.
I want to thank you so much. I see our credits are going up, and I'm glad that you came on the show because it was something that I didn't know. I think our viewers need to know, and I'm really